I'm Cynthia Hawkins, Gallery Director and Curator at the Bertha V.B. Lederer Gallery at SUNY Geneseo. Thank you for joining us for our interview with printmaker Linda Condon, whose work is on view at the gallery. COVID-19 has changed our daily and work lives, which also means restricted access to this and other museums and galleries. Hence, to broaden our audience, we have moved some exhibition programming online, which allows for lasting documentation of exhibitions and programming at the college. As in recent interviews, a PowerPoint of the works of art in the exhibition will loop while we talk. So, welcome, Linda. I am a great fan of all things printmaking.
Oh, thank you.
And it should be, I should say to everyone that you were in a juried printmaking show a number of years ago already at the former Lederer Gallery in Geneseo, part of the college. And it was there that I was able to purchase five or six works by a variety of artists. And one of them was one of yours, Making My Way Home with the ladder. So that's where I first came across your work and obviously impressed by it.
Thank you.
So would you tell us a little bit about your background? You know, seems you were born in Ireland and educated in various places. Could you tell us some about that?
Yes. In fact, I was actually born in London, in England. My parents were working there. Was kind of a number of years after the Second World War, and traditionally a lot of Irish people would travel over to England and work for a period of the year, and then come back to Ireland. So my parents happened to be in England at that time, and I was actually born in London. So my education experiences are all they're pretty diverse because of the kind of background that I've had. And then at various times moved back to Ireland, and then as a teenager, adult, I came back to Ireland and eventually went to art school in Dublin, and sort of reestablished more of a stronger kind of adult connection with the home country.
Yeah, so you had relatives there still.
Oh yeah, like everybody is there. My brother, uncles, aunts, and so forth. My parents are passed away at this point, but the always the focal point was Ireland. Just as I'm sure many immigrants would have a similar experience. They live in one country, but their heart is somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it's kind of you're like one foot one place and the other's in another place, and so it's an interesting way to kind of grow up. And I was not unique in any circumstances. A lot of Irish families found themselves in that kind of lifestyle.
So when did you become involved with printmaking?
Well, when I went to art school in Dublin, it was kind of an old school place, and you had to sort of choose from three areas. You could be a painter, a sculptor, or a graphic designer, and I never really kind of fitted very well in those categories. I ended up actually studying sculpture, but I just had this real kind of like for printmaking, but because of the structure of the school, it was hard to take courses in printmaking. So actually my main exposure to printmaking was when I came to the US, and I was, to get a recognizable American undergraduate degree, I actually went to Nazareth College. And, that's really where I had my first experiences with printmaking, with a printmaking instructor. And I think he still teaches there, Ron Netsky. Um, Very, very nice man. He wasn't actually that much older than us as students.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he was you know a great instructor, and so that's where it really started. My love of printmaking, and from sorry.
Oh, no, I was just wondering, so um, when you study printmaking, usually you do experience several different types. So what stuff, was more significant to you about screen printing than others forms?
Yeah, it's interesting how we gravitate to certain interests. I mean, um, my experience in printmaking is very, very broad. I did collagraphs and lithographs when I was in Nazareth. And then when I went to, there was a gap there. But when I went to graduate school, again, I was continuing to work with lithographs. And then the influence of this uh, other graduate student from Puerto Rico, he really kind of got my interest in screen printing. I just loved what you could do, and the surface detail, and it was actually through that influence that I started moving forward with screen printing. And unknowns to him, in some ways he was kind of a mentor. I mean, he was just another student, but I'm like, oh, I like this,
Yeah.
and so then I just did a lot of research on my own and experimentation. And when I was a graduate student, I had sort of two two degrees going. One was in industrial printing, and the other one was in fine art printmaking. And um, and so at the weekend on Saturdays, I used to work in the screen printing shop in the School of Printing, and I just learned a whole lot there about screen printing, and kind of marrying the fine art and the more industrial sort of like screen printing area.
So, so you have in this exhibition Reflections in Time, which on some ways seems like almost like a personal retrospective, right?
Mm.
A variety of works. So we have here images of the Irish landscape, a series works from the series Cruel Love. Um, what else? Postcards. So through these themes, what are you trying to tell us?
Oh, well, it's been a conversation really about my life experiences, um, both personal experiences and observations of events happening outside there, in the bigger world. Um, what am I trying to say? It's sort of like a journey through what I've experienced.
Right. All right.
And
So
yeah,
let me like point to some of the work. Okay. So
okay.
see through letter. This an earlier work? Because it's very graphical and completely unlike the rest of your work.
Yeah. Yeah, that this is sort of early work that I was experimenting with, and the sort of the background behind these pieces was sort of twofold. I was working as a graphic designer while I was in graduate school, and I was working with the purposeful use of like language and the visualness of language. I mean, when you look at an A or a B or some piece of text and you look at the design, I mean it's it was designed, somebody designed it, and it's really very interesting when you look at something so close up. So it was me having sort of a little bit of fun with just taking these pieces that were really meant for something useful, tell you about an event or whatever. And so I decided that I just wanted to put them in some playful way, and that's really what I was doing. But also kind of as a background noise in a way. As I mentioned, the different places I've lived, the different experiences from that. Um, there's one piece I don't know if I know that there was some space limitations. I don't know if it made it into the show, but there's a piece called My Street, and if you look into it, you will see all these different names of streets like Agassiz Street and Linnaean Street and Benton Street. And these were all places that I lived in different cities, different countries.
Oh, yes.
And
So,
and so I've been using that sort of personal history in the names of the streets and combine them in a design, which looks quite graphic. And I was also very interested in working with technical aspects of screen printing, like creating sort of veils of color, adding things like extender and um, to get that see-through look.
right.
Um, so it was sort of it was both looking at my personal history in terms of where I lived and all the places that I lived, then also working with within the area that I was working, that was my job, in graphic design, and using the bits and pieces actually that I found them on the floor, and decided to just sort of combine them in some interesting way. So that's kind of the background of those images.
Let's see what's happening here. All right. I'm just checking this. There's a fifth, it's supposed to be on a loop, so I'm waiting to see if it's going to loop or not. So
Okay.
also, I have a couple of questions about the series Missing Children. I mean, the two I find as image-wise the most compelling are the previous one, uh, this
This
one,
one.
yeah, and this one,
Mm.
right? So, I mean, I sort of like the complexity of the arrangement, the composition of those two the most. So
Okay.
can you tell us about your why you about these three works?
These images. Um, one day I was just sitting having a bowl of cereal, and I don't think they do it anymore, but there in front of me were these grainy pictures on the side of a milk carton, and I was just looking, and just sort of um, just over a period of time, probably they started started calling out to me. These children started calling out to me. And I'm thinking, how could a little human being disappear like that? And it was just shocking to think that somebody could be grabbed off the street or from home, however these children kind of were lost from their families. It was just such a poignant, thing for me. I just kept thinking about the children and how much they would have changed over the years, and I just didn't want them to kind of disappear. I wanted to make sure I remembered them, and if people saw the pictures, that they would remember them. That these are not inconsequential little people who were part of families. All the parents, mothers, fathers who would look at empty beds and look at closets full of their children's clothing and have no idea what happened to them. It it was sort of like one of those. It was a bit of a thunderbolt. It's
Yeah.
like, how can this happen?
Yeah.
Where are these children?
Yeah. It's really, yeah, because I wondered how this came about for you, but it certainly can. Yeah, that's.
And actually, Cynthia, what I did, like to sort of research it a bit more, um, I saw these grainy pictures on the back of the milk cartons, but then I went up to some advocacy place here in Rochester, looking for posters or more information about these children, and I got all these posters. I mean, just so many of them. There's a lot of children that go missing, and so from those posters, I worked on these images. Now, what's the style of screen printing in these images? These are all they call it it's called a reduction screen print, and they're all made from one screen. So it's a bit like a wood block. You're sort of working back and working back and working back, and it's not it's a sort of a complicated way of making a print, um, but it just seemed to that kind of choppy style just made you think of unraveling memories of children, the who knows what circumstances they found themselves in, and it was almost like creating bits and pieces of a life, and so it seemed to work very well, for that particular series.
Thank you for that, clarifying that. That's because those works are also quite different than in feeling, so
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate hearing about that. So so I think one of the uh groups also that series of works that also have an extraordinary story to tell is your Cruel Love series.
Mm.
And so that seems to be a story also about sort of a more the more youthful times, like waiting for the bus and the child and her children, poor mammy on my way home from school. So that's really talking about your teenage years, is that right?
Well, it covers a long period of time.
Mm.
It covers from early childhood years into adulthood, and uh, kind of it spans a very tough time in my life, in my 20s, early 30s, when a lot of past experiences kind of dovetailed with what was happening in my life. And it sort of, it was a period of about a year and a half, and all these images came just flowing out. And um, and they deal with, you know, sort of taboo issues of incest, you know, child abuse, um, sexual abuse, um, uh, relationship, you know, situations. So it really is kind of a very personal journey.
Yeah.
And I did write a little companion. I can't call it a booklet, that really sort of goes more into the stories behind the pictures. But it was a pretty intense time of working, that year and a half to 2 years, and putting these together. And this is, again, this is an unusual printmaking method where it's actually a mono screen print. They are just one of a kind, and where you actually drew with, I used water-based crayons, just because I had, you know, kind of developed in that direction, you know, water-based. All my screen printing materials were water-based, where you actually draw on the screen with the crayons, and then using, so it's sort of like having all these crayons on the surface of the screen, and then you take kind of a watered down extender base, um, and then you put it at the top of the screen, gently squeegee it down the whole screen, let it sit for about 20 seconds, and then with just a sharp um, push down of the screen and pull of the squeegee, all those colors offset on the paper underneath. And it's sort of magical in a way.
Sounds intriguing to me. I would like to experience that. I would.
Yeah, it is. It's sort of like creating an image and then putting water on it, and then having the water like go away, and then the image is kind of sitting on the surface.
You know,
So
because these
yeah,
prints are incredibly painterly.
yeah,
Oh, and
yeah.
I know some other people who work extensively in screen printing, and the whole methodology is entirely different from yours. And
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't think I had any idea that screen printing could be so painterly, you know, and
Oh, yeah,
natural.
yeah. I think people are more used to seeing that very flat surface, which is very much in some ways part of that newer series that I finished about the you know, the postcards, as I call them, those scenes of the areas where I come from in Ireland. So I think that's what more people are more used to seeing,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Here's the postcard series coming by now, and
yes.
they're entirely different than, say, Cruel Love, but they are also quite gestural in the mark making,
Mm.
and the color is so different. I love them, and mind you, to show you my silliness, when I read postcards, I thought they were going to be small, but
I know, I remember you saying that.
I was like, what was I thinking? But this, they're striking, and I also don't feel I have my response to them is quite it's different than responding to other kinds of printing or screen printing. They
Hmm.
also remind me, I have a friend who moved to England who's gotten into watercolor plein air painting.
Hmm.
These small, very small, and in part they remind me of her plein air painting, but the color here is much more I would say, well, saturated in a different way, but it's a
Mhm.
lot of light and pastel, and they really do make you feel quite, you know, some whimsy of good memories, pleasant times, So, I mean, you're very effective with your passion, how your emotional content to your work comes through very clear in each of these instances.
Huh. Okay, okay. And that, thank you. And that series also is a reduction series. And instead of just using um, like one screen, well, I actually do just use one screen, but I work the screen at in different places. Um, like usually I start with the sky, and that's the area of the screen that's open.
Mhm.
Everything else I've kind of blocked off. And and then I close down the sky area as I print it, and then I open up the bottom area. So it's it is all made from one screen, but just working different parts of it at different times.
So,
Um, yeah, and it's kind of a type of screen printing that I really like. It's complicated, but I like it.
yeah, so I just started lino printing last summer, and
Okay.
I did my first reduction print, which I found to be incredibly confusing to think about. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
a-
yeah.
as a, as a painter, right? So everything happens sort of like sequentially, but you can always go back and forth. But once you do something in a reduction process, that's done. You cannot
It's done.
change, and it's like, uh, so yeah, that took me, it was a real brain teaser as to me, as they say.
I know. It's not as unforgiving as, say, a wood block. I mean, you can always go back in and open up pieces. I mean, there is a lot more flexibility to it. Um, with when you're carving stuff off, as you say, when you when you've done that bit, you've done that bit. You
Yeah.
know, um, yeah.
I have to say also your drawing within the prints is very interesting in that I can the complexity of the process uh, is enhanced because of the amount of texture that you see in your prints.
hmm Yeah, I do. I try to create texture and just really enhance an image in that way. Um, and we've actually with some of these series, we've been recently working with animating parts of the image, and especially the sky image, which is a pretty interesting, it's just something we've been delving into lately, and it's kind of interesting.
So, what Irish landscape? Now here we have like a lot of movement, a lot of allusion to wind,
Mm,
and a lot of texture. And the color here again is entirely different. Each series seems to impart some particular um, response, and it is really clear, while
mm,
there's similarities, you know, in sort of your gesture, which is like really quick,
mm,
like, but the color changes elicit a really, overall a complex character. You know,
mm.
you're a complex character. So
Yeah,
Uh, it's very interesting. It's really exciting. So
Well,
Irish landscapes is from when?
it was a good number of years ago, maybe about 8 years ago. Um, and they Ireland, I don't know if you've ever visited our fair our fair country, but it can be a very windy place, and it's also a very complex place. And that idea of layers is is kind of working with that. And um, there was a movie called, I think it was called The Field. It was out a good number of years ago, and the importance of um, physical land to people, and that has quite a historic background in terms of the colonial power of England and the British Empire over Ireland, and how people were denied land, they were denied liberty, their language was taken away. It was centuries of just really undermining the culture and the people, and of course, and then of course the great famines, and then one of the last major famines where so many people then decamped for America and Australia. But in this particular one that you have up, my field, your field, just that tenacity of holding on to the ground, holding on to your piece of land, and how important the Catholic Church um, was to the Ireland getting its independence. Back in the 1920s, finally getting its independence, and how important the Catholic Church was to that, and also to the people of Ireland. Of course, you know things have changed and shifted over the decades, and the Catholic Church is another conversation at this point. But the one about Christie dreaming, that's comes from a particular summer that I call it the summer of the moving statues. And there was sightings. There's a figure in Catholicism, the Blessed Virgin, and you can see her in the center of the picture with the blue robe and the yellow, head covering. And uh, but this particular summer, there was all kinds of sightings of Our Lady or the Blessed Virgin. Um, there would be statues of her in different grottos around the country. There was all these kinds of these stories about her moving, moving her body or smiling or blinking her eyes, and it became actually really funny. It was sort of ridiculous. Um, Carloads, busloads of people were traveling back and forth, from different grottos in different parts of the country, just to see if they could see the Blessed Virgin, actually move. And you know, my own mother actually even got caught up in it, and so it was really quite a funny summer. And so that particular image kind of incorporates that. And um, and 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 it was also kind of a raw time in Ireland, politically, and violence, and you can see some guns up the top. And then I had a good friend who, Christy actually, um, he was oblivious to just about everything, and so all this stuff is going on, and he's just down there, sleeping away. Actually, was sleeping out on some rocks along the coast. And so there's a lot of sort of kind of political, social, a lot of stuff in that particular image, and how complex Ireland is,
Yeah.
and and continues its complexity now as the whole nature of Irish society actually changes.
Yeah, it's changing.
Yeah, very much changing. Multicultural,
Yeah, yeah.
ethnically. I mean, it's a very, very different country, and quite a different country, and it's lovely. It's lovely to have a place be diverse and rather than just homogenized. It's really lovely.
Right. We have a lot to learn from each other, from everything. Food.
Yeah. I see great similarities between the African American community and you know um, the history of Irish people. Yeah,
Hmm.
another conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Helsinki summer. So do you teach in Finland a couple of times a year, or is that your vacation time?
No, I had a personal kind of romantic interest in Finland at that time. It was a long time ago, and I went there to work and to study and also to give workshops. And um, it's from my experiences there. And you I for it's a very very interesting country, very interesting. I liked it a whole lot, and especially Helsinki, I liked it a great deal. um, Tremendous problems, I would say, there with alcoholism and just personal repression. And um, the desperate characters can be found in the forest. These were all experiences that I had, and just put them all in images. And um, yeah, so it I went to Finland initially for personal reasons, and then ended up kind of creating this connection with it over the years.
That's great. So this is the image that's on the card, your announcement, your e-card,
Hmm.
and your poster. Now, when you were talking about making these screen prints and how this is like incredibly the texture in this is extraordinary, right? I mean, how
Thank you.
challenging is that whole central area there?
Um, they are complex, and uh, and again, these are reduction stencils. They're all made on one screen, but I would concentrate on particular areas to develop them. And it's yeah, it is. There's again, this is really working with this sense of what is home, what do I identify with, who exactly am I, how do I place myself, where do I place myself. And this recurring image of this little house, was there for a long time. It's been there for a long time. And the turbulence of these little houses being rocked around on water, on the seas, the oceans of life. um, it's kind of all there, in terms of this diverse, confused background. And again, it's me telling myself a story, telling people around me, you know, a story about the unease in some ways that is always part of my internal kind of connection. Um, and
Well, it really has the feeling of like a rug, that three
oh,
dimensionality of
mm,
you know, it's really, and the waves at the bottom also read as like boats, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I never thought of them, but you're right. They
So,
could
I mean,
absolutely read as
houses
boats.
are entering these boats to escape or something. I mean, there's lots of ways to like read this, but the text is just extraordinary in that the central area. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the sea, but it's also something else, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
standing.
And what's nice about the reduction style of printmaking is you can just create so much detail. Um, and part of it is sometimes you're not even sure how it's going to turn out,
Right.
and you just sort of
Of course.
trust that it's going to work, and you keep working with it, and you know sometimes in my studio I'm like, oh my god, just don't like that, I don't like that color, and I've stopped myself from sort of going back and printing over it with white and then printing over with another color, the color that I find better, because I find, you just keep going with it, and it only ends up being what you think is a mistake, only ends up being a little part
Right.
of of the overall um, the
Right.
overall image. And yeah, yeah.
So, I have just had this thought about these couple of prints weight on her back as, how we might carry our communities with us, you know,
Hmm. Yeah,
having, I just had that thought, after looking at them for a few days.
yeah. Well, it's true. We just carry our community, our experiences, you know, all those different parts of our life. We just, carry them with us. They carry you just yeah. It's a journey with everything on your back.
So,
Yeah.
um, let me see what else I can get you to tell us. Yeah.
Okay.
So we've been through your narrative, which changes with each series. And in some ways, your work, uh, uh, I would say, overall, it's much more personal experiences with hints of uh, commenting on social or historical issues, even like that's not the major focus, but I guess I'm going to say that those things contribute to the narrative content via the individual.
Hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah, I would say that that's a good observation. Yeah. Um, and I just, I do wait for things to come to me. You know, I'm, I'm not necessarily. I love to do life drawing. I'm a great uh, sort of enthusiast of, figure drawing. Um, but I oftentimes wait for ideas to come to me, and I think, when you're in certain situations, um, they may be personal situations that bring up um, a series of prints like Cruel Love, or you know sitting and watching the milk cartons, um, or just feeling this great, like you're back on the postcard series, just saying, one day the places where I grew up were just amazing. You know, people pay to go on vacation there, and we walk around thinking, oh, that's just the sea, that's just, the river. And I'm like, these are extraordinary places, and all of a sudden it just became important for me to just capture them
Yeah.
um, in their loveliness. And like in Ireland, um, people have this tendency to, especially in the countryside, to paint their houses very bright colors. I mean, pink and yellow, and it sort of reminds me maybe of the Bahamas, or um, that love for like a bright color. I mean, in Ireland you need bright colors because it can be very gray. In the Bahamas it's always sunny.
Yeah. Well,
um,
in early America, people used to paint their houses, the insides, they used to paint them bright colors because it was so dark, you know,
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
campsite. So they would
yeah,
paint indoors pinks and bright greens and things like that. So yeah,
yeah.
this had to impart some light and color.
That's right. Yeah. And then actually in Finland, depending, it's not so much the case now, but in the history, in actually in more recent times, you could tell the kind of social economic standing of a person by the actual color they painted their house.
Really.
Most houses were painted kind of that redwood color,
Mhm.
because that was the least expensive paint. And so
Oh,
anybody that had a yellow house or a white house, that was a much more expensive paint to buy. And so it meant that you had more means, economic means, if you could buy that color paint. Yeah, yeah.
yes, cannot get away from it. We got to do something about that. I don't know what, but
Well,
you know.
uh,
So let me ask you, what artists or even, I don't know, writers or anybody, who are your biggest influences in, you know,
I like the work of um, uh, some of the German expressionists. Um, I was very impressed with their work. I like the work of Frida Kahlo. Um, that very personal centered kind of experience of life around her. Um, in um, I actually love the color kind of studies of um, uh, people like Renoir or uh, Chagall. I like some of their color work. I mean, I've always been very interested in sort of like a kind of social aspect, social, commentary on imagery, and people like Ben Shahn.
mhm,
Um,
yes.
has always been somebody that
So
uh,
art that's connected to reality, to the real world, to people's real experiences. I don't,
yeah.
why didn't I think of that? I mean, certainly I can see your Chagall in there, you know, I could see
Mm,
that once you said that. I didn't even think of it, which is,
yeah, but just that kind of, I think it's I mean, I love decorative work, and but I'm so much more drawn to work that actually, you know, has a comment of some sort, of
but it's also playful at the same time. You know, it's
yeah,
commenting on serious social issues, experiences, but it also has this element of playfulness in some
mm,
ways, somewhat humorous
yeah,
in some ways. So,
oh yeah,
the
yeah.
thing,
They don't have to be sort of mutually exclusive, but
right, right, exactly.
yeah, yeah.
So, what's your vision of the future for your work? What do you see happening uh, in the near future? You go back to Ireland every year or have before this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, everything has been thrown into, kind of disarray with so many people. I mean, my yearly teaching assignment in Dublin was all just suspended, and Ireland is in a different place in terms of its vaccination and opening up, and it's not to say that this year is going to be like past years. So it really is all a question mark. I you know searching for some kind of platform to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and um, it's really all just kind of open ended at
I
the
agree.
moment. I mean, my the thing that is making me very excited for coming up in May is a couple of life drawing classes that I go to are going to be back in session.
Oh, great.
So I'm so looking forward to that. It's just the idea of getting back with the model and drawing, and being present with other people
Yeah.
that have that interest to explore the human form. And I'm just that really is something that I'm really looking forward to on an artistic level. And of course, like everybody, reconnecting with our children and grandchildren and friends and family. And we're just all just longing for that, as we are. Yeah, as I am.
Well, this has been really wonderful. I'm glad to have finally gotten this show together for you. I've been waiting quite a while, and I think your work is extraordinary. I really do. And I hope that many people will see this online. We will post this interview on YouTube. It'll be on the gallery's webpage as well, with links to Flickr for the images. So,
Mm-hmm.
and feel free to send the links here and there and everywhere
Okay.
for yourself to help. I mean, this is, I think, a good marketing, documentation for
Mm.
you, and use it freely, please.
Okay.
And
Okay.
thank you so much for doing the show and for this interview. I'm so happy to have had the time to speak with you.
No, well, thank you, Cynthia, for the opportunity of doing the show and just talking about the work. It's really nice to have a little space like this to do that, and so thank you very much. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Cynthia.
Okay, bye bye.